Assignment 2.2 Steady State Exercise by James Boxford. In this assignment, I will be describing the physiological effects of steady state exercise upon the body. I will also be analysing 3 different performers and describing the results gained from 20 minutes of steady state exercise. Steady state exercise is defined as a balance between the energy required by the working muscles and the rate of oxygen circulating around the body to get to the muscles that require it. So I created a hypothesis, and these are my hypotheses. The cardiovascular response is that I predict that the heart rate will plateau after 3 minutes of steady state exercise. What I predicted for the respiratory response is that the breathing rate will plateau after 3 minutes of steady state exercise. The energy system response is that I think that the main energy system that will be used is the aerobic energy system. I'll be explaining why I believe these later on. So there's 3 different types of hypotheses that you can use. These are null, two-tailed, and single-tailed. A null hypothesis. The hypothesis where there isn't a large difference between the 2 specified populations. A two-tailed hypothesis is where it predicts that there will be one outcome, so the result can go 2 ways. This is like heads or tails. It will either be heads or it will either be tails. You could predict it will be heads and it could land on tails, but there is 2 outcomes. A single-tailed hypothesis predicts that the directions that the results will go, so it could go either this more one or more of the other. This is the method that I used for carrying out the 20-minute of steady state exercise. So first of all, you need to attach a heart rate monitor below the chest to the participant and ensure that the watch is working in unison. A way you can do this is just by by checking that the watch is working correctly, by looking at their pulse and also taking their pulse as well, just to check there is no incorrect data given. Next, you need to take the weight of the person. This is to make sure that the correct resistance is put on the bike. This is done so that you can clearly see that there is going to be something happening. If there was no resistance put on the bike, then it would be too easy for the participant and no results could be gained. You need to take all of the Thirdly, you need to take all of the tests on the performer. These are pre-tests, so e.g. heart rate, breathing rate, blood lactate, and O2 saturation. I'll be explaining how to do these later on. Then you need to ask them to get on the practice bike and pedal for 5 minutes. This is because it stimulates muscles that were being used and gets blood flowing to the working muscles. Also, it stops any injuries occurring. After the warm-up, you need to ask the athlete to get onto the bike and begin to pedal whilst you start timing. So for the method for the heart rate, I'll be taking the heart rate every 2 minutes. This is because it gives an accurate table of results and allows me to see if an anomaly has occurred. If an anomaly has occurred, then I can identify this and suggest why the anomaly has occurred and explain it. To measure the heart rate, I'll be using the heart rate monitor that goes across the chest and a watch. The test will begin at 2 minutes. I will take the recording and then every 2 minutes after that I'll also be taking a reading. So it will start at 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. This is so that I get a lot of results, and the more results I have, the easier it is for me to see an outlier. For the respiratory rate during the 20-minute steady state exercise, this is my method. So I'll be measuring this respiratory rate every odd 2 minutes. This is also because it gives a wide range of results, and I can see that a plateau has occurred, and also I can see if there was an anomaly. And also, if there was an anomaly again, I can identify it and explain why. I'll be watching the person's chest movements to measure the breathing rate. This is because it is an accurate way of doing it, and I can also ask the client to over-exaggerate a breath so it's easier for me to identify. It is not the best way of recording a breathing rate. However, equipment can be rather expensive, and it's a simple way of doing it, and it doesn't involve many complications. For the timing wise, once the test begins, I'll measure the respiratory rate at 1 minute and then every 2 minutes after that. So 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, etc. For the blood lactate. The blood lactate will be recorded at 5 different times throughout the 20 minutes of steady state exercise. This is because I can easily identify what energy system is being used due to the different timings. So I can identify at the start what energy system would be being used rather than what at the end. I can also identify how much lactic acid is in the body. Because of this, I can identify whether my client was working aerobically or anaerobically. Ideally, I would like my client to be working aerobically because 20 minutes of exercise is meant to be an aerobic event. But I can identify if there's a high level of blood lactate or lactate in the blood, moreover, I would be able to see that my client is working in the wrong training zone. And to do this, I could ask them to either pedal more or pedal less. To measure the blood lactate, I'll be using a blood lactate measurer. This is done by a pinprick, and then the lactate machine can measure the amount of lactate that is in the blood and then gives me a reading. The blood lactate will be taken before 2 minutes, taken before the event, at 2 minutes, at 5 minutes, at 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and 20 minutes, and then also after the event. This is because the blood lactate doesn't need to be taken every 2 minutes, as it is not as crucial as the other heart rate or breathing rate. However, it is still a crucial way of identifying what energy system is being used and how hard the performer is working. To measure the O2 saturation, I'll be using an oximeter. This will be done every 4 minutes, and I can also identify what energy system is being used because of this, and also identify how hard my performer is working. If I see that my performer's O2 saturation, I can tell them that they need to relax a little bit more, because if their O2 saturation is high, then the chances are the client is going to be working harder than they need to be, and they're going to be working anaerobically when they need to be working aerobically. This will be done every 4 minutes and will begin after exercise starts. I'll also be taking a reading before, and I expect that reading to be a little lower than it should be, because they would have done the warm-up, so their body would have been using the oxygen. After the test is finished, I need to make sure the client steady pedals. This is because an active cooldown is essential to preventing the effect of DOMS, and DOMS is known as delayed onset of muscle soreness. Also, an active cooldown is good because it helps rid the body of toxins such as lactic acid and carbon dioxide. If lactic acid and carbon dioxide were left in the body after steady state exercise occurs, then DOMS would happen a lot quicker. And DOMS can be severe because many people after DOMS. However, this can be prevented by heavy breathing and an effective cooldown. I will now be explaining the cardiovascular responses to steady state exercise. For the heart rate, I predict that the heart rate will plateau after roughly 3 minutes of steady state exercise. This plateau should then go on until the end of the exercise, and then a steady decrease should occur. During steady state exercise, the heart rate will increase at the start. This is because whenever you begin to do something, the heart rate is always going to increase due to the amount of oxygenated blood that is required by the body. However, this should then plateau towards the middle stage of aerobic exercise, because you'd be working aerobically due to the aerobic exercise, so the body has enough oxygen, and also the heart rate wouldn't need to be increased because the body is working at its max that it needs to. Prezi defines heart rate as an extended period of time performing steady state exercise, particularly in a hot climate. A steady heart rate will gradually increase and plateau. Stroke volume. I predict that the stroke volume will increase and then plateau during steady state exercise. Stroke volume would also increase during steady state exercise along with the heart rate. This is because the heart is going to have to beat harder, which means more blood is going to be leaving the heart and required by the working muscles. This would then plateau towards the middle stage of the exercise and then slowly drop off. Cardiac output. I believe that the cardiac output will increase and then plateau during steady state exercise. Cardiac output increases during steady state exercise because the heart rate has increased. Because of the increase in the heart rate, there is more blood that is going to be needed to be pumped around the body, so the cardiac output should therefore increase. I expect the cardiac output would then plateau during the middle phase of the exercise. Again, this is because when the heart rate plateaus and the stroke volume plateaus, the body has enough oxygen and there is enough oxygenated blood being sent towards the working muscles. Blood flow. I predict that the blood flow would increase during steady state exercises. and then should possibly plateau towards the middle stages. The blood has many organs that it regards as crucial while at rest, and these get the majority of the blood. This because they need to be kept going. However, during steady-state exercise, the working muscles begin to receive more blood. This is because they require oxygen to keep them working at a high intensity. The blood is mostly being sent to the muscles in the legs when you're going for a run, because the hamstring and quadriceps need it, and along with the gastrocnemius and tibialis anterior. However, your arms aren't working, so your bicep and your tricep would lose blood, and the blood would primarily be sent to the hamstrings, quadriceps, and gastrocnemius. This is why a feeling of you almost lose a feeling in your stomach. This is because blood is disregarded from organs such as the bladder and other organs like that, and prioritized in the legs. This is why you see many participants needing to require to go to the toilet before they start an event, because they have no blood holding their bladder in. Blood pressure. I predict that for blood pressure during steady exercise is that it will increase then plateau. Of course, I'm talking about the systolic blood pressure here. Systolic blood pressure should increase, whereas diastolic should most possibly decrease, or hopefully stay the same. Blood pressure increases during steady-state exercise. This is because there is more blood that needs to be sent around the body at a higher pressure that enables the working muscles to help the person move more. This is the systolic phase, what I'm talking about here. And the systolic phase is when the blood is leaving the heart, and the diastolic is when the blood is filling. And obviously, as the heart is beating more, there's going to be less time for the blood to fill. So the diastolic phase should naturally decrease, whereas the systolic should increase. When you're in the middle stage of the exercise, the blood pressure should plateau. This is because the heart rate would have hit a constant number, and the blood wouldn't be needed in quantity around the body as it is at the moment. So that rate should stay the same. Thermoregulation. I think that thermoregulation will increase during steady-state exercise. Thermoregulation is defined as the body's way of keeping the body at a constant temperature by distributing heat evenly throughout the blood. When you exercise, your body naturally becomes hotter. You can see this when your face starts to go red. This is due to vasodilation of the veins, and the blood vessels rise to the top of your skin and try to cool the blood down before sending it back into your body. And during steady-state exercise, the body's thermoregulation would be increased. This is because you become hotter. Because of this, the veins begin to vasodilate and come to the top of skin to cool. This is also why you go red. The body would stop this once it senses the core temperature is back where it needs to be, so the veins will then vasoconstrict and sink back into the skin, and that's where the redness is lost from. Venous return. I believe that there would be an increase in venous return during steady-state exercise. There would be an increase in venous return because the heart is beating more. That means more blood is being sent out, so more would have to come back due to the skeletal muscle pump from the working muscles. When we tested our clients on steady-state exercise, we used a bike, and they'd be using their hamstring group, their quadricep group, and their gastrocnemius. The skeletal muscle pump in these muscles would have to pump the blood back up to the heart, and that's why venous return would increase. There would also be an increased demand for oxygenated blood that the working muscles require to function and enable you to run/cycle at a steady rate, and this is how steady-state exercise is affected. Starling's law. I predict that Starling's law would begin to increase while steady-state exercise is occurring. This is because an increased field pressure stretches the heart and it increases the force of the contraction. The increased force of the contraction exerts more blood from the left ventricle, so cardiac output would increase when the atrial pressure increases. And this happens during Starling's law during steady-state exercise, because more blood is going to have to be pumped out of the heart because the blood is going to be required by the working muscles. I'll continue the respiratory responses in a second video.